Most people believe that if they just explain themselves clearly enough, long enough, passionately enough, they will finally be understood, respected, maybe even admired. That belief is quietly destroying your influence. Because the harsh truth is this: the more you explain, the less people respect you. Not because your reasoning is weak, but because over-explaining signals something far deeper. It signals uncertainty, a need for validation, and a hidden fear of being misunderstood. And in a world driven by perception, not just truth, that costs you power. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology tried to dress it up in studies and frameworks. They knew that words are not just communication. They are currency. And every unnecessary explanation is like spending that currency cheaply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That line hits harder when you realize he was not just talking about morality. He was talking about presence, authority, the quiet force of someone who does not need to convince others, because their actions already speak. So ask yourself honestly, how often do you over-explain your decisions, your boundaries, your worth, your intentions, hoping people will finally get it? And how often does it actually work? Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Research in behavioral psychology shows that people associate brevity with confidence. In negotiation studies, individuals who gave shorter, clearer statements were rated as more competent and more authoritative than those who gave detailed justifications. Why? Because confidence does not explain itself endlessly. Confidence states and moves on. When you over-explain, you unintentionally invite doubt. You open the door for others to question, challenge, and dissect your reasoning. And once that door is open, you are no longer leading the interaction. You are defending yourself inside it. That is the shift you need to see. Explaining too much moves you from a position of control to a position of defense. And defense is never where power lives. If this is hitting you already, drop a like so you lock this in mentally, because most people miss this pattern for years. Think about the people you naturally respect, the ones who carry weight in a room without raising their voice. They do not ramble. They do not justify every decision. They say what needs to be said, then they stop. That pause after they speak does more than any paragraph ever could. That silence communicates certainty. The Stoics practiced this deliberately. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But hidden in that is a deeper strategy. Speak less, but when you do, make it count. Because every extra word dilutes the impact of the ones that mattered. It is not about being cold or distant. It is about being precise. And precision commands attention. Now let's bring this into something real. Imagine you set a boundary. Maybe at work, maybe in your relationship. You say no to something. Simple, clear, firm. But then comes the urge. You feel it. That need to explain. To soften it. To justify why you said no so they do not think badly of you. So you start adding layers. You explain your schedule, your stress, your reasons, your logic. And in doing so, you hand over leverage. Because now they have something to push against. They can argue your reasons. They can negotiate your logic. They can poke holes in your explanation. But if you had simply said, "No, that does not work for me," and left it there, what is there to attack? Nothing. That is power. Not loud power, not aggressive power. Quiet, immovable power. The kind people feel even if they cannot explain why. There's also a psychological trap here that most people never see. Over-explaining is often driven by a need to be liked. You want people to understand you, so they approve of you. But paradoxically, that behavior lowers respect. And respect is what actually sustains long-term influence, not approval. Studies in social dynamics consistently show that people who appear self-assured, even with minimal explanation, are perceived as more competent than those who try to win approval through excessive reasoning. So you end up trading respect for temporary comfort. And that is a losing trade every time. If you are starting to see yourself in this, comment clarity below. It is a simple word, but it represents a shift most people never make. The Stoics would tell you that the root issue is not communication. It is attachment. Attachment to how others perceive you. Attachment to being understood. Attachment to controlling outcomes that are not fully yours to control. Marcus Aurelius again reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When you over-explain, you are trying to control how others interpret your actions. But that is outside your control. And the more you chase it, the more it slips away. Real strength is acting in alignment with your values and letting the perception fall where it may. That is not recklessness. That is discipline. Halfway through this, I want you to pause for a second. If you are getting value from this, subscribe. Not just for content, but as a commitment to sharpening how you think and act. Because these ideas are not surface level. They change how you move in the world. Let's go deeper. Silence is one of the most underrated tools you have. Most people fear it. They rush to fill it. They explain to avoid it. But silence, when used correctly, amplifies everything you say. In negotiation psychology, there is something called the strategic pause. After making a statement or an offer, the person who stays silent longer often gains the upper hand. Why? Because the other person feels pressure to fill the gap, often revealing more than they intended or conceding ground unnecessarily. When you over-explain, you eliminate that advantage entirely. You remove tension, and tension is where influence lives. The Stoics understood this intuitively. They trained themselves to be comfortable in stillness, in restraint, in saying less but meaning more. Another angle most people ignore is energy. Explaining takes energy, emotional energy, mental energy, time. And if you are constantly explaining yourself, you are draining resources that could be used to actually build something meaningful. Seneca warned, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Over-explaining is a subtle form of that waste. You are investing time in conversations that do not move you forward. You are trying to convince people who may not even be willing to understand. And in doing so, you slow yourself down. High-level individuals do not spend their energy explaining every move. They spend it executing. Let's make this practical. Start noticing when you feel the urge to add just one more sentence after you have already made your point. That is the moment. That is where the habit lives. Instead of speaking, stop. Let it hang. It will feel uncomfortable at first, almost like you are leaving something unfinished. But that discomfort is exactly what you need to train through. Because on the other side of it is a completely different presence. One that does not chase validation. One that does not need to convince. one that simply states and moves, and people will feel that shift immediately. There's also a misconception you need to kill right now. Being concise does not mean being rude. It does not mean being dismissive. It means being clear. You can still be respectful, calm, and composed without over-explaining. In fact, that combination is lethal in the best way. Calm tone, clear message, minimal words. That is authority. That is what cuts through noise in a world where everyone is talking too much and saying too little. If you agree with that, hit like again. It tells the algorithm this message matters, but more importantly, it reinforces it for you. Now, zoom out. This is not just about conversations. This is about identity. Are you someone who needs to be understood to feel secure? Or are you someone who understands themselves well enough that external validation becomes optional? The Stoics would argue that the second path is the only one that leads to real freedom. Because once you detach from the need to explain everything, you become harder to manipulate, harder to pressure, harder to shake. You stop reacting. You start choosing. And here is the final piece that ties it all together. Power is not loud. It is not frantic. It is not desperate to be seen or heard. Real power is quiet, deliberate, and controlled. It does not rush to fill silence. It does not spill into unnecessary explanation. It speaks when needed, acts when required, and remains steady regardless of how others respond. When you adopt that mindset, everything changes. Your conversations become sharper. Your presence becomes stronger. Your decisions become cleaner. And people start to treat you differently. Not because you demanded it, but because you embody it. So next time you feel that urge to explain yourself into being understood, catch it. Pause. Strip your message down to its core. Say it once, clearly, then stop. Let your actions do the rest. Because in the end, the more you explain, the more you give away. And the less you feel the need to explain, the more power you naturally hold.